get started. Cindy, would you mind doing the honors?
Certainly. This meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act with the annual notice advertised in the Trenton Times, provided to the Hunterdon County Democrat, to the Trenton Times, the posting of the meeting agenda on the bulletin board at City Hall, on the city's website at www.lambertvillenj.org, on the exterior door of the elevator entrance at City Hall, and was sent to department heads and members on the listserv. This meeting is being recorded using the Zoom meeting profile. The video will be uploaded to YouTube, and a link to the meeting will be made available on the city's website approximately 2 business days following the meeting. Recording will begin upon the meeting's call to order and will conclude upon the adoption of the motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a roll call?
Councilman Sanders.
Here.
Councilwoman Taylor.
Here.
Councilwoman Urbish.
Here.
Council President Sarah.
Here.
Mayor Fall.
Here. Can I ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to ask for a moment of silence for all of those serving in our United States military at home and abroad, and all of those who are fighting on the front lines of COVID-19. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to waive the instructions on how to participate until we move down to the moment of participation, Tina. So you're off the hook for right now. I'm going to remind everybody here that this is a working session, so this will be primarily discussion from the council and a short presentation from our community advisory team. Bill, would you mind reading the statement regarding council sessions?
Thank you, Mayor. Pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act, formal action by the governing body must be taken in public at a meeting that is adequately noticed to invite public participation and maximum transparency. Such requirements are not set aside during times of emergency, and therefore the city and its governing body must proceed with conducting these necessary meetings in accordance with state law and in a manner that ensures optimum transparency. The Open Public Meetings Act, as amended, authorizes governing bodies to conduct public meetings through the use of streaming services and other online meeting platforms. The city will utilize Zoom video conferencing, which also provides a dial-in feature if residents would prefer to participate by phone rather than video, as well as a teleconferencing feature for those who wish to connect by phone only. The city will continue to rely on the procedures currently in place for public comments directed to city officials during all meetings. There will be no change to the city's public comment policy for these virtual meetings. The city at all times will act within the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act for meetings conducted during this public health emergency so that the city government can continue to provide services to the community and the public can continue to participate and provide comments without interruption.
Thank you, Mr. Opal. So I believe we are waiting for, Paul Cool. Tina, Paul's in the attendees waiting room. Can we promote him? Okay, thank you so much. All right, so the first item of business for our meeting tonight is a update and presentation from the community advisory team, which will primarily discuss their work on the mixed housing unit on the police station site. We have provided 2 sample resolutions for the council to consider and discuss, as this is a working session. Unless there's, a strong feeling from the council, we'll leave those resolutions to the voting session to ensure that we've got some time to really discuss and dig into them. But I want to make sure that we had the potential language for those resolutions available to the governing body. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to our co-chairs, Sarah and Paul.
Great. Thank you so much for having us, Mayor and Council. We have prepared a presentation. I'm screen sharing now, so you should be able to see that. Today we are providing an update based on essentially the work that we've done over the last month since we last presented to Council on September 1st. So just to sum up what we presented on September 1st, for those who may have missed that, the CAT's first phase is really focused on the mixed income housing to be built at the current police station site. So over the summer, we engaged in our first round of outreach, and we did a survey, and we had more than 300 respondents, which was great. And the goal there was really to understand the community's values regarding what type of development they were interested in on the police station site. We also conducted a dozen office hours. We did FAQs from the community advisory team, and we did a question and answer with Mayor Fall. For our full presentation from the September 1st council meeting, you can visit the CAT webpage. We will also have these slides up on the CAT webpage, which has this direct link to that presentation. To kind of situate people as to what we're talking about in terms of this site, Emily Goldman, the city's planner, has provided us with this site map. And so you can see here this colored section of the site of this map indicates where the site is. So this brown rectangle here will be the 23-unit inclusionary rental multifamily building. This will be parking. All of this is on the currently developed site as well. And then back here, we're actually proposing that there be an increase in permeable surfaces to create some more usable space on the site for residents. And again, so you would enter here and then you would circle through the building. There'd be parking on the first floor. So since September 1st, the CAT has really been focused on gathering additional information from the community. So building upon the first survey findings, we conducted a second survey to zero in on the public's more specific preferences in terms of things like architectural design, windows, landscaping, and garage screening. We're going to go through those findings in a couple of minutes. We also, in order to further understand some of these results from that second survey, conducted a public design vetting meeting, which has also been referred to as a charrette. And we conducted that on September 26th. We're going to, again, get into those details in a minute. We also, since September 1st, have been working on understanding environmental concerns about the site. And to that end, we engaged in a question and answer with Vince Mazzei. Again, you'll be able to click on that link there. If you want to navigate to that now, it's posted on the CAT's webpage. Vince is the Watershed and Land Use Management Assistant Commissioner at the NJDEP. And we decided to do this Q&A with him because he's actually the person who wrote the regulations around building near Category 1 stream. And so given the community's concerns about the proximity of this site to the Alexaken Creek, we thought it would be really useful to meet with him. And I really can't recommend that video highly enough, but to just kind of sum up what he told us is building within 300 feet of a Category 1 stream, there are restrictions. The existing site is just outside of that 300 feet in terms of the developed footprint. So there's less concern, especially given that it's on that outside of that 300 feet from the Alexaken Creek. And so again, he does a really nice job of answering these questions. The video is about 20 minutes long. I'd really recommend it to everybody who has concerns. And Paul and I are also happy to answer any questions about that later on. So kind of delving into what we've done in terms of community outreach since September 1st. This design vetting meeting that we hosted was essentially guided by the same premise that guided our second survey, which was showing the community images and trying to understand, based on these images of different buildings and different environmental components that could be integrated into the building in terms of plantings and things like that, what people liked and why. So during the design vetting meeting, Emily, the city's planner, and Michael, an architect who works with her at her firm, provided an introduction of the various architectural components that we were soliciting input from the community on. And this was really educational. I think it was educational for both the community and the CAT. We learned a lot about architecture, and I think that was really useful. And then we went out into breakout rooms, and there were 2 CAT members and 6 to 8 community members in each breakout room. In those breakout rooms, these precedent images, which I'll show you in a minute, were shown, and the community was asked what they liked and didn't like and why. And then we came back as a larger group, and Emily led a discussion to build consensus across these different components of the building. So we're going to present what that consensus was. I will say overall, the general tenor of this meeting was really productive, and people were willing to really engage in the details of this building design, which was really great to see. What we're going to present next are the findings from the second survey and the design vetting meeting. So there was broad consensus across both the 90 participants who participated in the survey and the about 30 participants in the design vetting charrette meeting. Some of those 30 participants also completed the survey, and I also just want to take a minute here to note that among these 90 participants in this second survey, we had many new people who participated who hadn't participated in that first survey. So overall, what we're looking at here in terms of gathering community input regarding the first phase of the CAT's work, we're looking at between 350 and 400 people who really actively engaged in this process with us. So I would also like to take a minute here to just thank everybody who has engaged with us, because we really value that input. So moving on to our results. So here, what we're showing you here are 2 precedent images that really spoke to the community members who engaged in this process with us. And the idea is that through gathering this community input, we weren't going to have a rendering design. We were really just going to draw upon existing buildings to highlight what this community would like to see in the future on this site, and to really inform this redevelopment plan. So on the left, we have the Art of Sound building, and that's part of the Riverwalk complex. And then on the right, we have, so that's part of the Riverwalk complex on the south end of town. So that's kind of the south entry to town. And then on the right, we have this example building, which is the Philadelphia co-working space. And so this is one building that incorporates some of the more historic industrial elements that the community has expressed an interest in. So delving into some of the results for the different components that we were looking at. So in terms of footprint and parking, what was specified is that the development shall be limited to the footprint of the existing site improvements. So this is where the current police station is currently located and the surrounding parking lot. And then second, the building shall include 1 story of parking with 3 stories of units above, for a total of 4 stories. Then regarding the architectural design guidelines, and so I'm going to introduce some technical terms here. I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute to really illustrate what those mean, so just bear with me, please. So first, there's a strong community preference for classic historic industrial building that incorporates different design elements to create depth and character. And these are things that are going to go directly into the redevelopment plan. So this architectural style should be reflected in engaged pilasters to create the appearance of bays. Again, I'll show you a picture in a minute. Corbelling to create the appearance of a cornice for the top course. And basically what corbelling is an overlapping arrangement of bricks or stones in which each course extends farther out from the vertical of the wall than the course below. This helps to create some dimension for the building. And building off of that, there should be an interesting roof line to avoid a perfectly flat rectangular building. So to kind of highlight what some of these terms look like in real life, so looking at the Art of Sound, so we can see that these bays are created here by using these engaged pilasters. So that's that brick here. And then you create these bays, which accentuate the large windows. And then we can also look at the building's articulation by looking at this stone is like base course, and then you have the middle part of the building and the top course. So these are some of the things that we were focused on in the design vetting meeting. If we want to take a look at this for this Philadelphia co-working space, the bays look a little bit different. They're here and here as well. So you can see that there's kind of this horizontal delineation. And then you can also see that there's a clear base course in these buildings, a middle course, and a top course. And this helps to create visual interest in the building, which is, really useful given Lambertville's historic architecture and all the things that that offers. So some of the additional architectural design guidelines are that the building should complement the neighboring Rego building, but not replicate the building. And the building shall incorporate the following materials: stone for the base course foundation. Again, that's that bottom part of the building that I just showed you. And then using red molded, tumbled, or new used brick for the middle course without variation in colors. And then using metal framed windows. And then more specifically for the window design guidelines, the windows shall be operable windows, so you can open and close them, that are either rectangular or slightly arched, and a false arch such as a fixed header is not permissible. And then the windows shall be as large as possible with simulated divided lights. So this is basically just having a grid on the windows so that you're not looking at a flat sheet of glass. All right, Paul, I am going to turn this over to you now. Just tell me when you want me to advance the slide.
Okay. Before I get started, I'd just like to reiterate what Sarah said, that we really want to thank all the members of the community who participated in the initial survey, the second survey, the design vetting on Saturday, the 26th. It was really great to see so much community support and their ideas. We're going to continue to show you what was discussed. The next item that we talked about was garage screening, and the purpose of the garage screening is to, it has to be open to ventilate that part of the building, but we don't want people. We want to try to screen the cars, the lights coming out in the evening with that. So what was basically decided was it should be screened with a combination of metal and plantings. Again, in this picture, the plantings are vines. They don't necessarily need to be vines, but some kind of plantings there to help screen the garage. Next slide, please, Sarah. The outdoor space. There's really two areas of outdoor space. The first I'm going to address is the rooftop space, which we believe should be used for stormwater management plantings, or maybe used for a combination of stormwater management plantings and amenity space, such as a seating area, lounge area with shade structures that is scaled appropriately to the size of the building. Grills shall not be permitted on the rooftop. A couple reasons with that. It's just the additional maintenance that may be required. And again, if people are cooking and there's food there tend to be a lot of birds that fly around that part of the town, and they may invite themselves in for a snack while you're trying to enjoy your dinner. So we said we would not permit that. On the ground level, Sarah had pointed out the terrace, the open space, primarily in the back of the building, which would be on the western side of the building. Included in that would be some seating areas, plantings, or a sculpture garden, possibly sculptures from local artists, or a water feature, and a community garden area for residents. Grills may be permitted, but they would be separate from the seating area, such as an area closer to the refuge enclosure. And then finally, fire pits will not be permitted. Next slide. The next thing that we discussed at the design vetting were plantings, and the developer shall include and incorporate native drought-tolerant plants to reduce landscape watering and maintenance requirements. Another portion of the plantings would be roadway screening, and there we're recommending that they shall incorporate bioswales, which are channels of plants that address and filter stormwater, with large groupings of a small number of species that would also incorporate street trees. And then finally, planting beds shall incorporate plant materials for year-long screening, but be geared towards stormwater management and/or pollinator beds to promote biodiversity. So again, you'll see kind of a theme here that we want to the extent possible, encourage biodiversity wherever possible on this site. We also discussed stormwater management. The development shall incorporate innovative and progressive stormwater management best practices that embrace ecosystem-based, natural and sustainable versus artificial and high-maintenance means of treating stormwater quality at the conceptual design phase. For example, rain gardens or bioretention soils. The developer shall implement stormwater harvesting elements such as collecting stormwater to irrigate the plantings. Finally, we talked about lighting. The lighting shall be at a pedestrian scale and shall be downward focused and shielded. The project should reduce light pollution and try to eliminate all light trespass from the building and site. We don't want this to be, you know, something glowing in the evening sky because of all the lighting. So again, that's why it's downward shielded and you know, not big spotlights. Okay. Then the environmental design guidelines. The developer is encouraged to seek a green rating system. By that, we frequently hear about LED certification. That can tend to be expensive, and I'll go on to that. But there are other green rating systems that the developer could pursue to, again, try to encourage that. In addition, the developer is encouraged to incorporate solar panels on the rooftop, as well as plantings and amenity space if space permits. Now down at the bottom, you'll see the asterisk. The New Jersey Affordable Housing Law specifies that municipalities cannot require cost generative features. So again, saying that there should be solar panels on the roof can be costly, and that's why we're saying they're encouraged to do these wherever possible. So that finishes the results of the various surveys and our design vetting session. I don't know if we want to break, Mayor Fall?
Yeah, I was actually hoping to encourage a break because these are two separate sort of, I see them as separate conversations. So before we move on
Absolutely,
to
absolutely, yeah.
Discussion, you know, if there are questions, I want to make sure that if there are questions from council or comments from council, that we incorporate those first before we move to sort of what I think is going to be a larger discussion item. So I do want to say before I turn this over to the rest of council that I want to take a moment to thank every single CAT member. I know that this has been the course of hundreds of hours of work and volunteer work from both you and Sarah, and then on top of that, hundreds of hours of work for the rest of the community advisory team. I have spoken with residents sort of across the board over the last several weeks regarding their experience both in the survey process and at the design vetting process, and I have heard nothing but comments about its in-depth and professional feeling, that people felt like they were really heard, which is exactly what the goal of this council was when we created the community advisory team. So I think that speaks to both your leadership, but also to the commitment of our community advisory team. So I just want to start by effusively thanking you.
On behalf of the entire CAT, thank you very much. We appreciate that.
I thought you were going to say you're welcome.
Okay, you're welcome.
So on top of that, I do just also want to take a moment to recognize all of the hard work that Emily has done, and obviously her entire team, of course, Kate and Hints, but Emily has been able to drag this project from its infancy in 2018 to now. And I know that we had a lot of sort of innovative and changing ways in which we sort of thought through this charrette and some of the work that the community advisory team has done. And Emily has just been super flexible and helpful. And I just wanted to also thank her really quickly because not only is she one of our consultants, but also is a resident who is really committed to this process. So I just wanted to also take a moment to thank Emily. I have a couple of questions, but I will save mine until I've sort of heard from the rest of council. So with that, are there questions from council that I can open to? Councilwoman Erbish?
Yeah, I have a couple. The first one is for Sarah and Paul, and then I think the others are probably more for Emily. My first question is just, do you have a sense of the diversity of respondents? I know, and I just sort of mean in general, like age and where they live in town and background. Do you feel like, obviously this was an opt-in process, but do you think that you captured sort of a wide range of people living in town?
Yeah, so, I think across all of the different modalities of us reaching out to people, from that first survey over the summer to the office hours to what we've done in the last month, it does seem like we really reached people throughout the community and across different ages, renters, owners, newcomers, people who've been here for a long time. I will say that because the CAT is so diverse and represents so many different segments of the community, in the way that council and the mayor kind of designed the CAT and selected CAT members, we're able to do outreach to those very diverse groups. And I think that that's been really beneficial for soliciting people throughout the community to participate.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I think all of the different ways that you worked to reach people, it sounds like it had the effect of reaching lots of different people, which is great.
Yeah, and of course, obviously, we can always improve upon that. So in our second phase, we're really looking into creating an extensive list of stakeholders in the city and ensuring that we reach everybody. And given, how tight of a time frame we had for the first phase, by incorporating all of the CAT members' networks, we were able to reach out to many people, and we want to be a little bit more methodical about that moving forward as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Emily, I don't know if this is something that you can answer now, so it's totally fine. I'll just say, I should have said this at the outset, I think it's great that we're having this discussion now. I'm not going to be prepared to vote tonight. I think that having this discussion and also like giving Emily and folks time to go back and get answers if they don't happen to have them on, in front of them right now, I think is a good idea. So one question I have about the building, I think it's this last slide about, encouraging solar or, other features. One thing that maybe could be included there is having the building be like solar ready. I know there was a bill that was moving through the legislature, for instance, that would require new construction to be electric vehicle ready, which actually doesn't end up being a huge cost in terms of construction, but it can be costly to come in after the fact and add it. And perhaps something similar could also be applied for solar if we ever wanted to have a community solar project in town or something along those lines.
Yeah, so the New Jersey Local Housing Redevelopment Law was amended, I believe it was last year, so that it requires any redevelopment project to incorporate electric vehicle charging stations. So this project will have to include, I would imagine at the small of a scale of 23 units, probably at least 2 charging stations. But, we can definitely, include language to encourage that the building's solar ready. But, again, as I know Sarah pointed out, part of the affordable housing regulations and everything do say that, we have to the municipalities have to keep the cost generative features down. So we can definitely encourage it. I don't know if the developer would provide it, but we can certainly include it and encourage it.
Okay.
And then one other point I want to make, I know you're erring towards not voting on the resolution until the 22nd. Just so council knows, the final redevelopment plan has to be on file at the city on the 23rd in preparations for the discussion at the November 4th planning board meeting. So I just want to put that out there as well.
Do we have to procedurally, maybe this is built, adopt a resolution like this prior to Emily putting it together, or it's more procedural?
Can I answer that? Actually,
Sure.
I will. I'm happy to also have Bill answer this, but what the we're not required to pass the resolution, but I think to Emily's point, if we're making significant changes between this working session and the next working session on design guideline, or excuse me, in the voting session on design guidelines in particular, that it will leave our community advisory team and more specifically our planner in the lurch. And so if there are significant changes that we either vet out over the course of tonight's discussion or over the next several weeks, that we be in communication with that, you know, those get rolled to me, and that we are in communication with the community advisory team and the planner, so that we're not throwing in huge design changes or contradictory design requests a day before it has to be on file.
Okay. That's helpful. So just one last question. I'm sorry to dominate so much, but there were some specific recommendations about like grill location and fire pits and things like that. Is that level of detail typical? I mean, I just, like, for the record, I'm a little uncomfortable about having additional restrictions or parameters placed on a building beyond what all residents have to meet. In terms of, like, I can put a fire pit in my backyard. Obviously there's sound, you know, like the sound ordinances and everything, but I just think having additional parameters like specific to this building, especially because we are talking about affordable housing and equity issues, that just, I would be a little bit concerned about that, but I want to be, you know, respectful of the conversation that was had at the meeting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that was basically part of the conversation that was had at the design vetting meeting, and a majority of the participants did not like the idea of allowing fire pits. Some of the precedential images were, and maybe that's really more because some of the precedential images were, instead of seating areas and grills, it was really like a built-in fire pit or fireplace area. Versus just like a, you know, metal fire pit that you buy at Home Depot or something like that. So the thought was that having a fire pit would promote people to be, or encourage people to be outside when it's dark out, and then there'd be noise and things like that. So the discussion at the design vetting session was that most of the attendees were not for having fire pits there. Maybe it's a distinction of a fully built-in fire pit, or, you know, but that was what the discussion happened
Gotcha.
on 26.
To pop in on this idea, because I also had written something about this when I was reviewing this. It does seem like we are actually reducing amenities that, because this is a mixed income building, this is not just affordable housing, you know, grills and access to available roof space, and, you know, welcoming public gathering areas are all, you know, amenities that apartment units use to, you know, encourage, you know, millennials like me to move into 2-bedroom apartments that are, you know, overpriced to subsidize the affordable units in that building. And so it does seem like we're cutting these folks off at the knees to provide like nice amenities to, you know, potential residents. And, you know, it does strike me as sort of interesting, particularly because there's not a ton of residential action happening over on that, in that particular area within, you know, 250 or 300 feet. So any sort of just general activity isn't going to create huge amounts of, you know, of disruption, you know, and anything that's particularly late at night would be subject to our regular sound ordinance. So I would, you know, generally agree with Councilwoman Urbish, find this a little bit strange and, you know, potentially limiting for a developer to create a competitive marketplace home when they're competing against, you know, an apartment unit in Bordentown that can have a grill on the roof.
Yeah, I think that the idea of the grill on the roof versus on the ground level, I think in addition to the concerns about maintenance and birds, I think, there might also be that fire safety concern with having the grill on the roof. We weren't going to prohibit grills entirely, the discussion
Gotcha.
wasn't to prohibit grills entirely from the site, just not on the roof level. For those reasons, for the maintenance and the birds and fire safety. But the discussion at the design vetting was that they didn't want the grill, the majority of the attendees didn't like the idea of having the grills in the actual like terrace areas where there's the seating areas and stuff like that, because of smell and things like that. They thought that, if somebody's grilling something while somebody's trying to sit there and read and relax at the same time, it might be competing things. But that was part of the discussion.
That's helpful. Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I obviously want there to be a good balance of things. I like kind of in my gut, I have concerns about having additional restrictions on a specific site that aren't applied equally around town. So that's my main concern at the end of the day. And I just want to make sure that whatever we're doing is being responsive to the recommendations from the community, but it's also, I think, our responsibility, at least I certainly feel it's my responsibility that, we are building, the city's laws and enforcing them in an equitable way. So that's all I had. Thank you.
I've got a question, but I want to make sure, other members of council, if they've got anything. This question is really for Emily, although Sarah, you may want to jump in here as well. Understanding the rule about cost generative requirements or demands as a part of this design process, Emily, do you feel that any of the requirements around the visual interest, in particular the building of those bays or the articulation of the facade that would create more use of brick would be considered cost generative by the developer?
I might need to get back to you on that one and confer with an architect at my office, but I don't think so, because we're really talking about, if you look at the Art of Sound picture, it really looked like it was, 3 or 4 extra bricks to create that corbelling and that interest. So it really shouldn't be, you can see kind of at the top, more at the top of the bay. It's, let's see, 1, 2.
Right here, Emily?
Yeah, like 5 bricks at the top level. And then it's really only, 1 brick out on the sides of the bays to create that little dimension. So I don't really see that as being too cost generative, that's something that would kick it in. It's things like absolutely requiring like LEED platinum certification and having to
Things
have
that are obviously supposed to stop this building from ever being created as a means of like pushing back on affordable housing.
right. And there's ways that the developer can also build this, like looking at the stone base course, most likely that's going to be poured concrete that's then faced with stone. So it's not like it's going to be individual stones used to build that base. So there's ways that the developer would be able to do this where it's still cost effective and wouldn't create those extra costs.
That gets to my second point, because I didn't participate in the design vetting. Was there a conversation about, either brick facing rather than full brick? And, sort of secondary to that, like, was there a conversation about sort of creating a visual brick facade versus an entirely brick building, so as to like when you're entering into town, it appears to be a brick building, but there are portions of the building that are not, are built with a slightly or a different material. So was any of that discussed or?
Yeah, we didn't go to that level of detail, but again, we're saying that they have to, the visual facade that people will see will have to include that stone base course and the brick. So what, you know, and we've specified the type of brick because there was an overwhelming majority. I think pretty much everybody wants it to kind of have this like old brick feel, which is that red molded, tumbled brick that we're going to specify. So whether it's, you know, faced with that or it's actually built with that, I don't think it's really that visually. I don't think it'll be that much of a difference. I think we'll still wind up with a built industrial looking building like this.
I know, Paul, there was an issue, this was before my time, I want to say in like 2014 or 2015 at the planning board about there, you know, being a lot of pushback about the like thin facing, brick facing. So I just wanted to see whether or not that was, you know, something that people were really pushing back against in the design vetting.
I don't think there really was pushback. It's not included in all the examples here, but in the examples that were handed out and viewed on the day of the design vetting is another building that's in the Riverwalk complex at the south end of town, that kind of long office building. That was a new building. Wasn't part that was built, and again that was all brick, and that was part of the you know what the developer there wanted to, you know, continue, you know, what was on that site, which includes the Art of Sound building. So that's been around 10, 15 years, I guess, at least.
So I think the last question that I have is really sort of more about how we can continue to engage. I know we've sort of been talking about this as like phase one is the design of this particular site, and then we're going to move on to phase two. But I'd like to sort of just say here that, you know, particularly as we get to a place where we're potentially identifying a developer and beginning these conversations, that, you know, we maintain and continue you know, an open dialogue with the CAT as a whole about these, you know, not just about these particular issues within the design or requirements within the design, but as we start to make these negotiations, as things come up, that we can continue to go back to not only the community, but specifically the community advisory team, because they've really engaged in this work to vet out ideas as a part of that negotiation.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm happy to.
That's we'd be glad to do it.
Okay. Yeah, Councilman Sanders,
Yeah, I had a couple questions if I could.
please.
So I just thought it might be, I asked this question, and Paul and Sarah, thank you for your time and the prep for this. So I answered a lot of my questions there, but I thought it might be helpful for folks to hear the 300-foot line from the Alex Saucon Creek falls where on the
Sure. Let me just pull that up. All right. So, yep.
Zoom in, but it's the black line.
Yeah, I know. I can't.
Basically.
Let me see. Here we go. So it's this black line here.
That's essentially it. That's where the flood hazard area line is. So it's basically, if you know where the basically where the edge of the parking lot is, and they have a small wooden fence, that's essentially where that 300-foot buffer line is.
Gotcha.
Which is also essentially where that black line is.
Right. And while you have the picture up, I didn't recognize this, but it is currently, it's paved on that western side of the current street.
Right over here. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that, when you said you wanted to increase the permeable surface, that's what you were talking about right there?
Yeah.
Is to from its current status is to create that as a permeable surface. Okay.
Correct.
You know, Mayor Fall commented on the feeling of the you know, the CAT participants and so forth. And was there like an exit survey, or was there some way to like get a feeling, was there a survey done of the CAT members and their experience through this? I don't want to do death by survey, but I was curious whether like there was a you know, or could you comment on the sense of the CAT members and your observations of what this process looked like?
Sure. Paul, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I think the CAT members were very satisfied with the whole process. That quite frankly, going into the that meeting on the 26th, we didn't know what to expect, and it turned out that it was just everybody enjoyed it. As Sarah said, there were a lot of good conversations, different points of view, and it was a rewarding day for all of us.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a full CAT meeting last week, so it was a few days after the design vetting meeting. And overall, I think the takeaway from the CAT members was that this was a really productive meeting where we were really able to engage with a lot of people in great detail. But we haven't surveyed them. We can always. I love a good survey.
You don't have to survey. I just, it is important, I think, for me to hear or for others to hear what that sense was from the group. It's hard to do that.
In summary, I think the CAT members were very happy and pleased with the whole process, and the outcome of this.
Okay. And then I guess that last question is, you've created sort of a sort of rules, prescriptive rules as to what the building should look like, and that was the task. Was this infused with like any kind of sense of I'm not sure realism is the right word, but is this the kind of a structure that a developer would build? Like what you come up with, was there, a dialogue around the realism of this kind of a project?
Part, to some degree, yes, I think it is. In going through, and I know it was in the breakout group that I was in, but then this came up when other breakout groups were responding at the end, that everybody was cognizant of the cost. Some of the examples showed, some of the older buildings around town that have wood and stuff like that up around the roof lines or the third floor, that could be expensive. To build it and more importantly to maintain it. So people, and I know when I filled out the survey, some of the things I looked at, I had that in the back of my mind. So I think that permeated a lot of people's responses, that they were aware of the cost.
Okay.
Can I just ask, Emily, obviously your expertise here is so important. You've done this. This isn't your first rodeo with, building out these development plans for municipalities who are trying to, deal with their affordable housing obligations and build something that's still within the spirit of their city. Do you feel like, this process has generated something that's realistic and good?
Yeah, I think that this building, the outcome of the design vetting and all the surveys, I think, it's we've come up with this historical industrial building, which is what I think we've always envisioned what would be on this site from the start, to again complement the historic buildings that we have within the city, but we don't want to recreate any of them, which is also very consistent with the city's design guidelines, which says to incorporate elements of the historic buildings, but again, not recreate them. So I think what we ultimately ended up with is very consistent with what I kind of like envisioned in the beginning is what we would end up with on the site. And it was, it was a very, it was a great process to go through to really get the community's feedback to help fine tune a lot of the smaller site details and everything.
Yeah. Okay, great. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think this was, as you said, this is what we were talking about those many months ago. But it is good to see that there's been, we were able through this process and specifically through all these hours of volunteer works, consolidate around community consensus here. So yes, Council President.
So first, I wanted to thank the CAT for all the in-depth work that they've done here. It's just amazing. And I love that you've come together with an idea that'll kind of bookend the town from south to north with a very similar look. I think it's a great idea. I did have one question, which maybe is beyond the scope of what you guys are doing, which is fine. So you can just let me know. But as I think about walking up to this building, for example, how would you enter it? Would you come in through the garage, or is there, you know, I guess what I'm thinking is as I walk up, I'm basically walking into kind of a parking garage. So
Sarah,
Emily, maybe you have some idea.
yeah. Sarah, can you zoom into the
Yeah, of course.
again a little bit? So you'll see once we zoom in, there's going to be a sidewalk that is along Route 29. The main entrance of the building will most likely be somewhere on the north, possibly the northeast corner. That's where most likely the elevator, it's either that corner or the northwest corner is where there'll be a stairwell and an elevator. And then the other corner will just be a stairwell. Most likely, it'll be at one of those two corners that will have the main entrance, that will most likely have the mail, you know, where the mailboxes are, all of that type of stuff. So from the outside, but there will be doors at most likely both of those corners there, because for both the stairwell and then kind of the more lobby type elevator mailbox stairwell location. There will also be an entrance from underneath the building for those tenants that will be parking underneath the building, so they don't have to walk out of the garage area to then get into the building. So there'll most likely be doorways on both sides of those kind of squares that you see on the inside of the building. On the northern side, the bottom, the ones on the southern side will be most likely more for like the electrical equipment and that type of stuff. So the two main doorways would most likely be on the northern side. I would imagine the main entrance would probably be on the corner closer to 29, but you know.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, thank you to the CAT team. It's a great plan, and I really love the aesthetics of it and love how it all came together. And some of the questions I had got answered, and had the last one here. So thank you very much.
Councilwoman Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks everybody for your hard work on this. I think the recommendations are good, but at the risk of being the lone dissenting voice here, I just want to caution us. This is not a plan. This is what we have come up with as the CAT. We will have to negotiate with a redeveloper. We have chosen to go the route for lots of very important reasons to develop a redevelopment plan without working with a developer, which is not how it's always done. So I just want to caution us to use language and to be very clear about the reality that when we get to the stage of working with a developer, we will have a choice as a community to make of sticking to what's in the redevelopment plan to 100%, to 50%, and what willingness will we have to negotiate with the developer? Because ultimately, the only way this project gets built is if a developer can afford to build it. And so I love what we have here. I just, we're talking about where the entrances are going to be. We haven't designed a building. There's no building design. We don't know where the entrances are going to be. There's going to be an architect brought in by a developer to build this project. So I'm on board with everything. I just want to caution us to not set expectations in a way that is potentially unrealistic.
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman Taylor. I agree with you here. Ultimately, we have, I think, as we've said many times before, a moral obligation to be providing affordable housing, but we also have a court obligation. And that court obligation, I think, is the more serious and stringent, pressure on our community. Ultimately, I think it's good to remind us, as well as our community members and the community advisory team, that this is just stage one. And I think, Sarah and Paul have both already this evening expressed a willingness to, when we get into conversations and negotiations with developers, to use all of the data and information that they've gleaned from the public already to help inform those negotiations so that we can get to as close as possible to this, to the redevelopment plan that will be passed through the planning board in November.
Yeah, and I think also to speak to Councilwoman Taylor's point, once the redevelopment plan is adopted, or even while it's going through the public hearing process, the city might want to start thinking about starting to draft the request for proposals at that point, or take a break and start that in January or something, because the next step of the court order is to have that executed redevelopment agreement by May. So, I know the first step in this is to actually have the redevelopment plan adopted. That's included in that request for proposal. But, the next step is really creating that RFP and then soliciting, sending that out, soliciting for responses. So a lot of those concerns will be vetted, I guess, when the proposals come back.
And at that time, if there's sort of clear and consistent pushback across multiple developers, right, we can then make a decision about whether or not the community advisory team can use the data that's already been generated through these conversations, or if we have to go back out to the community to renegotiate terms. So I think we have some options here on ways in which we can move forward so that the penumbras of what this design vetting has given the council and the planning board can be, honored while still getting to a place where this actually gets built.
And Mayor Fall, I think Paul and I can commit again that we really are interested in engaging with the CAT throughout this whole process. So we're happy to engage however that's useful for the council.
Yeah, I think it will become clear when we get to the next stage of the process, but this is, I don't want to, I want to be really clear here that this is a really important step that we've hit tonight, a marking period that we've hit tonight, and the first real stage of the actionable items that were given to us by the judge. So, I think we have a roadmap now of what the community consensus is on what the design of this building should look like. And then, if there needs to be modifications as a part of the negotiation, we'll take those seriously using the same roads that we have thus far in the process of this design. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the council? All right, excellent. Moving to the next stage of of your presentation.
All right. Paul, here's the slide for you.
Okay, the recommendations to conduct a phase one. During the course of the last month and a half, the CAT had had discussions about the merits of a phase one over several meetings. It wasn't something that we spent 5 minutes on at the last meeting. What we've listed here are the reasons why to conduct it and why not to conduct it. The reasons to conduct a phase one: better understanding of the constraints on the site, address the community's concern about environmental contamination on the site, and to build trust, and less of a black box for the developer seeking to purchase / develop the site. They kind of know what they're getting into. On the other hand, reasons not to conduct a phase one: likelihood that a future developer will also conduct a phase one. And with this in mind, the city would be spending money that it would not have to. Unless a phase one comes back completely clean, there doesn't seem to be a benefit for the sale price. Phase one would not address the types of environmental concerns which many people have regarding building near the Alex Aukin Creek, which is a Category 1 waterway. And then also the city attorneys advised us not to conduct such an assessment. As a result of all these discussions that we had, we held a vote, and the vote was 10-6 in favor of recommending to the council that the city conduct a phase one. So you can see it wasn't a slam dunk on either side of the decision.
Yeah, and just to kind of highlight what Paul said, so the CAT had a really robust discussion about this and considered all these different reasons. So I guess now we're turning this recommendation over to council.
So I'm going to start here just because I think it's really important before we move into the discussion of whether or not to move forward on this particular recommendation to really frame again what we're asking the community advisory team to do and why we sort of tasked them with this and how this recommendation came up. One of the things that the city asked the community advisory team to do is to figure out and generate input from various portions of the community in order to hear not just general pushback, but really dig into what the reasons are, why there's pushback, and how to build out consensus and support for moving forward on the production of affordable housing. I am going to turn this over to our attorney also, because he was involved in this conversation, but ultimately, while the community advisory team can make recommendations to the council, we as a group can't usurp our responsibility to be the stewards of public funds and ultimately the elected decision makers who have to make these decisions. So the community advisory team has done sort of as much as they can. They cannot demand that we do something. They can only recommend it and why. And I think that they've done that here. But now we have to, as a group, grapple with that recommendation. So, Mr. Opal, would you mind giving us a brief summary of why you and another environmental attorney recommended that we not move forward on the phase one?
Sure. I think the most significant reason was that if the city voluntarily conducts either a preliminary assessment or a phase one, and it confirms that there is contamination present, the city would most likely be responsible for completely investigating and remediating what is found. I think it's really important to note that the city is not aware at this time of any contamination at the property. But at the same time, typically in, where there's a redevelopment agreement in place or a purchase and sale agreement in place for a developer to acquire the property and then develop it, there's generally a clause in either one of those agreements that allows a specific due diligence period. The city would essentially grant access to the contract purchaser, and they would go in there and have a specific period of time, and there'd be specific conditions on what they were allowed to do, but it would give them time to do whatever tests they want to do, and they'd have recourse under the respective agreement as to whether or not they want to proceed. So that, understanding all that, that was the reason for our advice not to conduct either a preliminary assessment or a phase one.
Okay. And your advice, regardless, still stands on that being the recommendation from council, that
The recommendation from who?
the recommendation to council that, moving forward on a phase one is not recommended.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to open this up for discussion. Council President Acero.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the CAT's efforts and, and their point of view and the time they took to look into the very specific reasons, for and against. What I just wanted to say, I think, is that we understand that a phase one must be completed, and it will be completed. And, there's no question about that. It's really more about, the question at hand really is who should take on the risk and the cost. Should the city take that on, or should the developer take that on? And quite frankly, given what I've heard very loud and clear from residents over the past year about cost cutting, and then that's, kind of compounded by the pandemic. I really, the residents have been very clear that we should not take on any unnecessary costs. So I think that this would be an unnecessary cost for the city. The phase one will be done. The results will be what the results will be. But I believe that having the city take on the risk, which may equate to cost, as Bill referred to, and then the cost of the study itself, I just don't think that the city should put itself in that position. So that's my point of view on it at this point.
Councilwoman Urbish.
What? I guess, I'm a little bit, I don't fully understand all of the details of phase one. I guess I think for me it would be helpful to have a real clear understanding of what the phase one is looking at. So it's not looking at sort of C1 stream impact. It's my understanding that it's looking at like soil contamination. So maybe a little bit of clarity on that would be helpful. And also understanding what these types of studies generally cost so we know what we're talking about. And I don't know if anyone has an answer for those questions tonight, because we're just discussing this, but I think that is important to understand.
If it's okay, I'm going to call on Emily, who may be able to answer to that question to some degree.
The questions about the cost?
Both the cost
yes,
and what the scope of a
Phase
phase one sort of entails.
Yeah. So a phase one assessment's really more of a record search. So it looks at historic records. There's no physical test pits or soil, like nothing is actually touched on site. It's a site visit, looking at the site, and then a record search. They probably range anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000, I think, in terms of cost. But it really is, it's a record search to identify if there's any areas of concern. And then the next step would be a phase two, which is that's the step when they would start actually taking soil samples and things like that.
And Emily, do you, just for our edification here, do you have any idea of what a phase two would usually cost?
It's dependent on the number of areas of concerns that are found. So it's hard to estimate that at this time.
You're not just going to sort of shotgun something into the air, or?
I'd rather not, because it's been a while since I've worked at an engineering firm and I've had to, do proposals for that type of work. So I know it's dependent on the number of areas of concern. So I don't want to just throw a number out there that's completely off base.
That's fair.
Is this the type of thing that a developer would do and pay for on its own prior to entering into an agreement, prior to acquiring a property, or is this generally done after acquiring a property?
No, this is the type of work that the site due diligence work is something that a smart developer would do prior to acquiring a property. They to know what constraints they have, what issues they might come across, if there's any site remediation necessary. I mean, most developers want to know that before they, sign their name away purchasing a property. So it's usually done before final transfer of property.
And Emily, just to lean on your expertise a little bit more here tonight, do you feel like in your experience in the production and development of this type of housing units, are there often some sort of area of concern that comes up in a phase one?
Yeah, especially since, the site was a former auto body shop, and just even going out on the site and seeing how there's piles of debris down in what I like to call the valley portion in the flood hazard area. I mean, each of those piles would most likely be considered an area of concern. So there's definitely gonna be things on this site. It's just the extent of them, I don't know. I'm not somebody that actually performs phase one. I just know what they generally entail.
And Emily, do you have a sense of like what kind of records would be folks would try to get access to for phase one?
Yeah, usually they include kind of like historic aerial searches, and if there's any, past documentation in terms of uses of the site, any construction documents that they can get from the city, that type of stuff.
Councilwoman Taylor, did I see your hand raised? I'm sorry, I have to toggle.
Yeah, no problem. I think the other point to add here is that I think we always want to hedge our bets, but I think there's essentially no question that a developer would do a phase one prior to acquiring the property, especially in New Jersey. Redevelopment sites there aren't a lot of sites to develop, and redevelopment sites require significant due diligence. And if we were to do our own, it is highly likely that a developer would do their own anyway. So I am not in favor of us doing a phase one and paying for it. As Emily noted, we have a good sense of the use history of the site, which is the kind of thing that a phase one is designed to uncover, and would likely lead to a phase two anyway. So I think it makes most sense, with all due respect to the CAT's recommendation, I think it makes most sense for us to not make this expenditure, with the understanding that any developer that is serious about the property will do it on his or her own.
Councilwoman Taylor, to follow up on that really briefly, do you mind if I piggyback off of your comment for a moment here? Sarah, I know that we have a couple of experts on the community advisory team who specifically work around remediation and development. Was there a strong sense from those members, without asking you to sort of parrot what they're saying, was there a sense from members of the community advisory team that have that specific expertise, that they were interested and supportive of the phase one, or sort of echoing some of the concerns of the legal team?
So, I think it depends on the different perspectives that each of those people kind of brought to this. So I'm not entirely sure how to answer that while still protecting the anonymity of the vote that we presented tonight. So.
That's the right call. I just, I'm particularly curious. Councilwoman Urbish, you've got a question here.
Yeah, I just kind of maybe, so one thing, if you can talk about it, just, you have the reasons for conducting and sort of reasons against and under reasons for. There's, on the second bullet, it's talking about building trust. And I'm wondering if maybe you could expound on that. Is it building trust with the community on the part of the city or on the part of the developer, like trying to understand that aspect of the.
Yeah, so I think that over the course of the last, say, 6 to 8 months, community members have expressed concerns about environmental conditions of the site. And so these concerns have been both in terms of contamination, and then most vocally, I think, are these concerns about building in proximity to a Category 1 stream. And so we were kind of trying to address these concerns on multiple levels, right? So we did the Q&A with Vince Mazzei, and then there's also this idea of understanding this soil contamination. Emily, it looked like you had your hand up. I don't know if you.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was just going to say the phase one won't address the C1 stream stuff at all, but yeah, I put it down once you started talking about the Vince Mazzei Q&A.
Yeah.
Well, so one thing too with that, I think I've said many times before, making sure that we sort of build back and maintain community trust is really critical. One concern I have is it sounds like based on the description of the phase one, and that it's really sort of document review, it's a visual site sort of inspection, but it's not anything beyond that. I don't know if that's actually addressing the concerns that we have heard over the past several months from members of the community about specific contamination. It's just really going to identify if further study needs to be done. So yeah, that's just one thing that I'm kind of wrestling with on this. I mean, I'm sure we'll hear from folks during public comment too, which maybe can provide some clarity on that point, but that's just another piece that I'm wrestling with here.
Yeah, Councilwoman Urbish, I mean, it seems to me that, you know, both from Councilwoman Taylor and Mr. Opal, that, you know, that if we do a phase 1, it will necessitate a phase 2, and that will necessitate a larger expenditure here. You know, Emily, it might help in terms of my clarity to get a sense of, you know, as a part of the area need of redevelopment study that was performed, there was a visual site, a sort of a visual, I'm blanking on the word here, look-see.
Yeah, a site visit.
There you go. As well as some pretty significant amount of documentation, you know, overview, and that actually helped to provide the planning board with the reasons why it was an area in need of redevelopment. Do you feel that a phase 1 would provide a significant amount more than the area in need of redevelopment study that we've already spent money on?
Well, I mean, it's different. So the purposes are different. You know, like I said, just based on the presence of those kind of soil piles and an asphalt pile down in the valley portion of the site, you know, I'm pretty confident that a phase 2 is going to be recommended. Beyond that, the site remediation is really not my line of expertise, so I wouldn't know what to pinpoint out as other areas of concern on the site. You know, possibly the pile of gravel that's on the edge of the parking area, you know, but in terms of the in and around the building, that's not really my level of expertise to be able to point out other areas, but I'm fairly confident that a phase 2 would be recommended. I don't know if we have enough information to say, you know, the soil samples that would be done during a phase 2 are different than kind of the soil sampling that occurred in the 2014 geotechnical analysis. They didn't test for any contamination. They only looked at the soil strata. So it's a little different.
Yeah. Councilwoman Taylor, I hate to put you on the spot here, and if you don't know, that's totally fine, but I do know that you have a development background here. So I guess my question is, we know that to some extent remediation ultimately falls on the price of the building, right? There's no free lunch when it comes to this type of work, right? So even if we engage with a developer and we have a phase 1 and a phase 2 that the city has paid for, and the developer does their own phase 1 and phase 2, you know, that all gets negotiated. The remediation of that site will get negotiated out of the price. Does that, I mean, I guess if we know that to be true, and we know that, you know, identifying this earlier isn't going to change the price that we set, it will just ultimately change the price, the end result of the negotiated price. Understanding that as an argument here, you know, do you feel like I've missed anything here? And I guess my follow-up question is, have you experienced, in your experience, has this ever sort of significantly decreased the total value of the property?
I mean, I don't think I have enough experience to answer the second question with any sort of, you know, finality, but you're right for sure that any type of environmental contamination on a site affects its value. There are cases where municipalities might be treating a highly contaminated site as a brownfield and finding grants to clean it up prior to any sort of developer coming in. That's not the case with this site. It's the kind of potential. I'm sorry, one second. Sorry, I've got some family background noise here, making it hard for me to keep my train of thought.
We were talking about brownfields.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, technically any site with even the perception of environmental contamination, people sometimes talk about as brownfields. So that it gets kind of messy. But in our case, you know, Lambertville is a desirable place. People are going to want to look at the site. They're going to do their own phase one. And yeah, the value of the site will ultimately be determined by, you know, looking at a range of factors, one of which will be the cost to remediate and of course the cost to develop. So I'll go back to what I said earlier. We know developers are going to look at this. I don't really think it makes much sense for us to do it at this juncture.
I'm going to go Emily and then Councilwoman Urbish, if that's okay with you.
Can I just jump in real quick? I'm sorry, because off of what Councilwoman Taylor's saying, it sounds like what we're talking about here is basically, are we going to pay for a study that is also going to be paid for by, you know, a potential developer? I don't even think that we're talking about anything beyond that. It's just, are we going to pay for something that is redundant at the end of the day? That's kind of what it sounds like. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer that question here, you know, though I think the strongest argument that the community advisory team has made is that they feel that a phase one would create some and address some of the feeling of mistrust from the government in choosing this site, regardless of the fact that it's duplicative. Right. So then our question has to be, as a council, is that worth, you know, spending money on a site and on a plan where people have explicitly asked us to stop spending money when it's not required by the court, if it adds the value of creating trust within the community. Emily?
Yeah, no, I was just going to talk more about, you know, with the former use being an auto body repair shop, most likely the contaminations on site are in like the benzene type ranges. Again, this is back from when I used to work at engineering firms and do some school development authority remediation projects. But you know, with that, and the geotechnical work that's needed on the site, you know, where they have to compact the soil and they'll have to bring in more fill, it's quite possible that again, it's possible that the site remediation that may be needed on site, if there is anything in the soils, could be capped and dealt with during all that geotechnical work anyway. So it's, you know, but until you know what if there are any and what, you know, it's hard to cost out and identify what the potential financial impacts would be.
Are there any other comments or questions from the council here?
I just have one comment, and I really want to hear from folks. I am concerned about the level of speculation that is going on about contamination on a site. I think we have a relatively good understanding of past uses, but I think part of, frankly, the confusion and some of the mistrust has been sort of wild speculation about this. And so I just want to be very clear about what it is that what has been recommended to us and the aspects of the decision-making process that impact that. And to me, we've been recommended to do a phase one study that is a record search, you know, a site visit and visual assessment, and nothing beyond that. It is something that a developer, you know, any potential developer will do and pay for on their own, but we have been asked by the community advisory team to pay to do that study on behalf of the city, in addition to what will be done by future developers, as a way to have, I guess, a deeper understanding of the site and build trust with the community. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about remediation or, you know, some speculation on what could be contaminated on the site, because those are very different conversations.
I agree with you to a certain extent, except to say that, you know, the onus of responsibility at the point of a conversation about remediation, you know, if the city moves forward in earnest in doing a series of studies on this site, and that ultimately, regardless of who does the study, right, if we do not sell this property, the onus will be on us to remediate. Once we know, we can't not address it. But that being said, I want to take a moment here because I think one of the things that's been missing from this conversation, Councilwoman Urbish.
Do you mean Councilwoman Taylor?
Oh, sorry, no. Okay, Councilwoman Taylor, do you want to? Did you have something to say?
I do, but I'm happy to wait. I just couldn't tell if you were actually calling on me or not.
Oh, I saw Councilwoman Urbish wave her hand, and so sorry, I've been toggling back and before. Actually, you know what would be very helpful, Sarah? Would you mind stop sharing your screen? So thank you so much. Much better. Okay. Councilwoman Taylor, if you'll just briefly allow me to finish here, I think, I want to take really seriously that the vote with the community advisory team, while 10-6 is not an overwhelming unanimous vote, it is a significant portion of a team of people who we have tasked to think thoroughly and seriously about these issues. And, my strong preference here is particularly when the community advisory team is requesting more information or further study, that the council provide them that information and the funds to do it, because they are directly engaging with the community. They are the ones who are sort of on the ground, and as we've expressed tonight, have spent hundreds of hours speaking with the community about this. If their recommendation is saying that, spending thousands of dollars to do this study would sort of answer to a feeling of mistrust within our community, which is one of the things that we've asked them to help us mitigate, then I think it's worthwhile, regardless of the sort of back and forth that we've had tonight. So, I know that we're not prepared to vote on this tonight. I think we should save this for further conversation. But at this point, I haven't heard anything tonight that would stop me from my strong preference of following through on recommendations that the community advisory team has given us. Okay.
Mayor, can I ask one quick question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, please, Mr. Sanders.
Was the committee aware of the advice from council before it voted?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Councilwoman Taylor.
I fear that we are couching this as just like yet another study where you hire some consultants and they come look at things, and that is not the case when you start getting involved with LSRPs and DEP and looking at contamination on sites. This is not just some study. It's also a waste of money because developers are going to do it no matter what. And while I am all for anything that can build bridges and repair trust, I don't see how this is going to repair any trust. There's the basic history of the site is a known quantity to all of us on this call right now, and anybody else who wants to have the information can have it. It's out there. So I worry that in an effort to smooth things over, essentially, we're putting this particular study in the wrong, we're characterizing this potentially in the wrong way. So I, of course, appreciate the work, value the opinions of the CAT, want to build bridges, want to build trust, and want to operate from the absolute most facts that we can have. But us paying for a phase one doesn't do any of those things.
That's helpful context. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Councilwoman. All right.
And I have some of my own research to do on this as well. I just want to be clear about that because I clearly need to better understand what a phase one is.
So at this point, we have two members of the public who have their hands raised. You know, I think in previous meetings, we were discussing, you know, holding all public comment till the end. We're not taking any actionable any action tonight. And so if that's the case, yeah, I just want to flag here, you know, I think we had an aggressive agenda tonight. I'm not sure we're going to get to all of our discussions. But yeah, can I get a sense from the council on whether or not we'd like to hear specifically about the this issue, or if we should wait till the end till all of our discussion is over?
I don't have a strong opinion. I mean, I think this is something that we're talking specifically about community engagement on, so probably engaging folks while we're having the discussion would be helpful. I mean, we're not taking action, but yeah, maybe we table some of the other discussions that we have that are not like very time sensitive to the next meeting.
Yeah, I think at this point, being that it's already 8:35 and we have some other significant updates that we're going to have to do, we'll table the landmark legislation discussion and hopefully be able to have that at the October voting session so that we can take action in November. And then we'll also table the street sweeper changes. Sorry, Councilwoman Urbish, for another evening. So Cindy, if you can just note that on our agenda moving forward.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we'll take a few minutes of comments, but then obviously the public comment will also, you know, so we're going to ask to just keep your public comment to the conversation around the phase 1 discussion. Tina, would you like to call the first witness?
Sure. Lauren, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Lauren Kovacs, 90 Douglas Street. For clarity, there seemed to be a lot going on about whether or not the phase 1 being conducted by the city or not being conducted by the city was being, what was the answer to that?
Well, we haven't come up with an answer. That's the heart of the debate right now.
Okay, so I have 4 comments. I'm appalled that the CAT process was planned and completed without proper understanding of what information would be available to be used by developers. That means that the CAT process and the associated costs would be more time and money wasted by the city. Number 2, in my opinion, asking the CAT to spend time and money on the question of a phase 1 and then disregarding that input based on known recommendations by city professionals gives the appearance, in my opinion, that the city created the CAT more to show an appearance of wanting to elicit and use community input than actually wanting to use community input. And I'm disappointed with the way that the council has implemented and utilized the energy and dedication of the CAT members and participants, of which I'm very thankful to for their work. To dispel the misconception of duplication of effort in conducting a phase 1 at the police site, finding contamination now may prevent further wasting of time and spending on this project site, especially since the cost of a brand new police station on a new site has not been circulated to my knowledge. Costs to cap the police site and renovate the existing police site with the grandfathered regulations that are in place will likely be a fraction of the cost to relocate the police site, including purchase of a new property and all new construction, and remediating the site for residential, or versus remediating the site for residential use, which has a much stricter standards and will cost much more. Also, the city should want to remediate contamination for the residents' safety and health. Finally, with the above information about the cost of remediation for residential development and the cost of relocating a police site onto a whole new property, one of the council person's comments about saying that we should be saving money per resident's request by not having, not spending on a phase one, flies in the face of the city's ongoing message that we shouldn't shoot ourselves in the foot with short-sighted practices. Thank you.
I guess I'll start by saying, Lauren, I'm very confused by your comments. This council has just engaged in almost 40 minutes of debate in which we disagreed with each other about whether or not to take the recommendation of the community advisory team. So your claim here that we are simply doing some sort of, I'm sorry, I didn't write down your phrase here exactly, but just using the community advisory team's volunteer work as a dog and pony show is blatantly false. We're disagreeing with each other actively and using the community advisory team's recommendations to inform that conversation. Secondly,
well, the CAT came to you with their recommendations and you immediately came out of the gate saying that the attorney and other people are saying that we shouldn't be doing a phase one and have been advocating through this process to not do a phase one.
Lauren, I want to be very clear that—
It seems like you've made up your mind.
Lauren, I want to be very clear that moments ago, I said that we should take the CAT's recommendation very seriously, and that I have not heard anything in this discussion that has dissuaded me from providing the community advisory team with the spending request that they have, and that 10 to 6 was, while not a universal agreement, was enough for me to move forward in supporting a phase one.
So what are your comments then on the comments that the CAT process may not have produced fruitful and useful information going forward, and the idea of this cost of moving the police site? What information does the city have on that?
As we have discussed on multiple occasions, and we have discussed literally 2 weeks ago, we are in the first phase of the community advisory team where we are discussing the police site. There is no secret information we're holding about what the next stage of the CAT and the city is going to be working on, where we talk about rehoming our police and the various ideas that that will be generated from that procedure.
So how is it though that we've gotten so far in this process without knowing what any sort of costs would be for moving?
That question has been asked and answered over the course of the last 3 months, and I'm going to ask that we get back to the question about the phase one. We've heard your comments. I see that we have comments from multiple members of the presenters who'd like to also speak to your comment, but I'm not going to get derailed into this conversation again. Sarah, you had something that you wanted to say?
Oh, yeah, so I think what I was just going to say, Lauren, first of all, thank you for participating in the design vetting process. We really appreciate you coming to that. And I would say that the CAT wasn't tasked with discussing the merits of a phase one. That's something that came up within our internal deliberation. So that was something that we brought to council rather than coming the other way around.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Sandy, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question. Sandy, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hi. I just want to say I love the design of the building. However, I have some concerns. And when the CAT was organized and the survey was indicating merely design aspects, I asked, why is the cart going before the horse, one of the members? Because that's what it seemed like. Why are we proceeding with a site that we know nothing about really in terms of whether it's viable or what the expense would be to the community? With taxes going up 31%, I'm concerned. So when I asked that question, I was told that the mandate given the CAT was only to deal with the design, which again seemed like the cart before the horse.
So,
you know, it just seems to me like the site has so many problems. I'm not sure why we've fixated on that. We have over at the YMAC a building that the the club wanted to give to the town that would provide you, if you actually just took that building and built this wonderful building you've designed near the buildings that represent it, that might be an idea. So that's my input.
So Sandy, a couple of quick misconceptions there. The YMAC was considered for this site before we went to the police site. It was held as with the contract purchaser. It was never offered to the city as a gift. That is just simply not true. We worked directly with that contract purchaser for months to try and build a significant number of units there. Having also sat on the planning board, that YMAC site is getting direct public pushback for lack of parking, over densification, all of the same sort of arguments that you hear relatively regularly for a 9 or 8 unit site rather than a 23 unit site. So it just right off the bat, that's not the case. Second of all, as we have discussed on multiple other calls in our affordable housing FAQs, which are on the website, on the affordable housing panel that we provided earlier this year, and in multiple versions of these conference calls before, the process by which affordable housing sites are determined as a part of the court hearing process with Fair Share Housing does not allow us to have a public vetted hearing about what our affordable housing plan is. We had to do that privately because it was a part of ongoing legislation. We worked directly over the course of my entire first year going through other sites besides the police site before we landed on that as a viable option. And we had a ton of public pushback on other sites that were recommended, including the historic Clawson property, the YMAC site, the Napa Body Auto Parts store, and others. So while I understand that there's some frustration that there wasn't public participation in the identification of this site, we are not putting the cart before the horse. The judge has deemed this site, with the information that he had regarding the same information that we have now regarding the site's history, that it is developable, that there are not so many issues on this site that it is not developable. So what we can do, and what we have agreed to do as a council and with the support of the community advisory team, is to work directly with the community on what we can work with the community on, which is figuring out a way to provide affordable housing in town that is still holds the historic nature of our community, and that design does not change the sort of the northern entryway of our town.
Am I still on?
You are.
Okay. Then I guess the next phase of this concern is if moving the police station results in no longer having a grandfathered police station, because from what I understand, Flemington attempted to do that and realized that it was going to cost them $4 million to do it and chose not to. So I have a concern. I mean, and I think many of the residents here do, for taxes to go up 31%. And for us to be moving ahead as though, you know, that next phase is not considered yet, it's a little bit alarming. I just would like us to have a better understanding of what this is going to cost the citizens, especially I want to know what it's going to cost me.
Well, that's totally fair. And what I can say here is that the council, myself included, has been working diligently to ensure that we don't make decisions on affordable housing that we know will have direct ramifications on your tax dollars. For instance, the 2018 plan that we started with would have cost millions of dollars, direct taxpayer dollars, in order for us to be able to continue. And we said that wasn't acceptable. We knew that there was going to be, that taxes are always, that wallets are tight, and that we had to protect the public dollar, and that we could not spend millions of dollars on continuing with that project. So we believe at this point that this is a more cost-effective means of providing affordable housing in our community, particularly because it includes the sale of property rather than the purchasing of property, which would have been our previous plan. So we take the protection of the public dollar really seriously here, and I want to let you know that as we move into the next phase, that's going to be at the top of everyone's mind.
Okay, well, I agree with Urbish and Taylor that double spending for a study doesn't make sense, and I will stop at that point.
Thank you, Sandy.
Janine, please state your full name and address into the record, and please proceed with your comment or question.
Hi, everyone. It's Janine McGregor, 161 Swan Street. First of all, I'm on the CAT. Were we not going to be mentioning how we voted? Was there some kind of anonymity that you wanted to protect, Sarah? I mean,
if you feel like saying how you voted, I feel like that's probably fine. That's your choice. I just overall, I wanted to protect the CAT's anonymity.
Okay. All right. So, you know, we are, I thank you guys as our city council for empowering us to make recommendations. The CAT made recommendations to you, but you guys as the elected officials are making the final decision. So I'm not under any, understanding or any delusion that you're going to accept everything that we say, because you guys are the elected officials. I just wanted to point that out first, that, I feel that we're working hard and we're making recommendations to you and you guys make the decisions. A lot of people are saying, that it's, that you shouldn't be doing anything contrary to what we say. It's your decision. You guys are the elected officials. I did vote no on conducting the phase one for a lot of the reasons you guys already brought up. But one thing that we didn't discuss in the CAT, and I'm going to bring it up here as a person who's been in environmental remediation for the past 34 years. One thing we didn't think of is the only disadvantage to not doing a phase one, I think, is that the city is not quite on an even playing field with the developer. You don't have the similar analysis in your pocket. So when a developer says to you, hey, there's 10 areas of concern, and I want to sample 5 of them are contaminated, and I want to knock $50,000 off the price of the building, you can't turn around and say, you can't disprove that. You don't have any bargaining chip. So I'm wondering if maybe it's more important for the city to have something, say, in an access agreement, when you let them on your site that you still own, when you let them on your site, or in the contract that says that your environmental consultant must review and accept the results of that phase one. Put you in a little bit of a better position if you don't do the phase one yourselves. But again, for all the reasons you guys stated, I voted no.
Thank you, Janine. I appreciate that. I'm going to ask you to stay on for a quick second. Mr. Opal, did you have a comment?
Yes. Regarding that last point, I think any purchase and sale agreement that the city enters into would have the provisions for granting the contract purchaser developer access to the property. And one of the provisions that we've negotiated in agreements past has been that the city is always given the opportunity to consult with its own environmental professionals with regard to results of any tests or the costs involved.
Great.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Opal. And thank you, Janine. I appreciate your comment.
Paul? Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tina. Did anybody have any questions or comments for Janine before we move on? Okay, great.
Paul, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Paul Stevens, 39 Quarry. So I guess my comment is, it's interesting to me the way the discussions evolved around the wanting to do phase one. One of the pros for it is building trust from the community. I guess from my point of view, doing the phase one is not going to be what, deciding on the CAT's recommendation to do the phase one is not going to build any more trust from me personally. What would build more trust is to take the input from everywhere. The CAT is just one input. Mr. Opal's another input. Ms. Goldman's another input. Councilwoman Taylor, all people that have a lot of expertise that didn't reside in the CAT. And you need to be able, as was just pointed out, you are the elected officials. You know, there are certain times where, yeah, you might not agree with the CAT. Okay, you went out and you got their recommendation, you understand it, but there's a bigger issue here, and that is, you know, in my point of view, do you want to open this Pandora's box when you don't have to? At this time, you can come back later and do it, you know, spend the money then, not spend it now. It's going to get done to a first approximation anyway by whatever potential buyer there is. Then you can go back if you feel it necessary to follow up and do it. So yes, I guess what I'm saying is taking the whole picture, everything into account, the whole scenario is going to build more trust from me than just saying, oh, well, we have to take the CAT's recommendation to build trust. And that's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Jennifer, please state your full name and address into the record, and please proceed with your comment or question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yes. Okay. This is actually Jacqueline Romero, 31 Lambert Lane. First off, I want to thank the CAT. I know you guys put a ton of work into this, Sarah, and other members of the CAT. And as a community, we really do appreciate it. I do think the designs look very nice and in keeping with the community. I have some larger objections, and I do want to talk about the phase one. First off, I think Sandy, who is a community member just previously, made some great points. We're putting the cart before the horse here. I don't think that we know enough about the cost of relocating the police station. The community's been asking for those figures in a comparison for some time, and I'm concerned that we are in the worst economic downturn of all time. Let's be serious here. Congress cannot even pass a stimulus bill for people in our community who are seriously hurting right now. And we're talking about relocating our police station in a vacuum, in an unknown to us community members who pay very high taxes as it is. We don't know what this is going to cost us in a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. How many times are we going to have to relocate those police? And can we afford to bring them back to Lambertville? Those are some serious questions that I want this council, when you guys go offline, to sit down and really talk about, because we as community members are concerned that what we're doing here for 4 housing units out of 40, are you kidding me? That we are sacrificing some serious tax dollars and some hurt and pain for people who are having trouble paying their bills right now. So that is one concern, and I think that we kind of shirked off Sandy earlier, and she was making some great points. The other thing I will say with regard to phase one is that is a cost that's always borne by the buyer. We have no incentive as a community to pay for that on this land right now. It doesn't make sense. I do think it is redundant, as Councilwoman Urbish was saying. The only reason we would be paying for a phase one is to make this land more desirable for developers, so they don't have to pay for that and they can go straight to phase two. There's no reason for us to be doing that. And we don't, quite frankly, we as a community do not have those funds. And if someone wants to come in and develop this land and they want to do it properly, they need to bear those costs. And our town should not be paying for that. So that's all I have to say, and I appreciate everyone's time. You guys have done a great job of presenting this, so thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I appreciate it. Councilwoman Urbish?
Yeah, Jacqueline, I appreciate the comments obviously on phase one. It's always great when someone agrees, but the comments that you made just about sort of the cart before the horse, and I think that some of that is inherent in this really, in my opinion, flawed process that we are kind of stuck with in the courts. We have to go through this process of creating a redevelopment plan, and that's the part of the process where the city can really put in community feedback in a really strong way. But we're still many months out before we're at a point where we have to have an agreement with a developer, which would be May next year. And that is still months and months away from any actual physical relocation. And so I think you're not wrong about the cart being before the horse in this. Unfortunately, some of it is outside of our control. And I think, you know, we need to continue to be very clear in how we communicate about where we are in the process and what those additional steps are and when they're going to happen. And, you know, I will not be on council at the point in which these decisions are being made, but I know from, you know, working with my colleagues here, no one is going to be making decisions about relocation without having a very clear understanding of what the different options and those costs are. But I hear you, and I hear the frustration. I think I share some of it with this process, and it is challenging, but you know, I appreciate you engaging in it despite those frustrations and providing your feedback.
Here's the one thing I will say. I do think that it would help if we had figures on what relocation is going to cost us and what it's going to take to bring our police force back here. I do think that there are arguments that we can take to a reasonable judge about the cost to this town at this particular site of having to develop this site, what it's going to cost for us to remove our police, bring them back, the interim of relocation and what that means for this town, and that maybe this isn't the best idea for this town. In this economic time, I can guarantee you, you will have a reasonable judge on the other side who will entertain other thoughts on different sites where we can get more housing that is to our benefit and maybe doesn't have this residual issue of what are we doing with our police force. I mean, it is pretty tremendous. And I think that's what you're going to hear from a lot of community members, is that we're really concerned about that.
Jacqueline, you have my full promise. I have made it here before. I will make it here again, that we are not going to move the police until we have a place to rehome them. And that includes having a full and developed plan of what that cost is going to be. Now, I've said that on multiple calls, but I will say it again specifically to you. We are not moving forward on moving an inch of paper out of the police department until we have a full-fledged plan of where they're going to be rehomed.
Okay, and I do appreciate that. I think that people would like to see our folks fighting in court and presenting those kinds of figures to the judge.
Now I want to be very clear here. I'm not suggesting that we're taking those back to the court. What I'm suggesting is that over the course of the next several months and very likely far into the end of 2021, that we are going to be able to find a solution that is reasonable and cost effective for this city. And that's the plan.
That doesn't fully address my concerns, but
I hear you, but I think at that point, all I can say here is that the city is not interested in moving forward on a plan that is going to be a multi-million-dollar debacle, which is why we moved away from our original affordable housing plan. And I'm making a direct promise to you that we will not move the police until we have a place to rehome them and a full plan of what that is going to cost the city.
I think it would be helpful for the town to know what's our net gain on this redevelopment process and what is our net loss on removing the police station. And
Absolutely. And before a ream of paper is moved out of that building, we will have that discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clinton resident, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Yes, Lily Chen, 17 Clinton Street. I'm going back to maybe 9 months ago when you spoke publicly at the live meeting at the Acme building, explaining the reason why you were developing this new settlement agreement because of the Clausen farm, and you needed to replace that because of the opposition of the community. And I'm really not aware of this great opposition. I am hearing the great opposition about moving the police site, though. So now that the Clausen Farm is on the market, why is it that we are still pursuing selling the police site, since you felt you could not, that we had to preserve this farm from being redeveloped? And now the farm is on the market. Why can't we plead to the judge that we can't afford this? We can't afford to relocate the police. We can't afford the soil remediation. I'm sure there's going to be issues with the soil. Why can't we go back and just go back to the 2018 plan, since the farm is on the market anyway?
So the 2018 plan would have cost the city many, many millions of dollars. That is why we can't go back to the 2018
Can you expand on that?
Sure. The 2018 plan included a condemnation of Academy Hill. We would have to pay market value for Academy Hill. When we moved away from condemnation, as a part of the change of the change from the 2018 plan, we stopped us from having to cut a check for many millions of dollars of that site.
So
we were going to have to purchase the Academy Hill site. I'm sorry, Lily, if you give me just one quick second here. We were going to have to purchase the Academy Hill site. We moved away from that plan so that we no longer have to purchase land at taxpayer expense. And instead, we are selling land. So instead of purchasing land, which would have cost taxpayers millions of dollars, we're selling public land so that we don't have to purchase land.
So are you telling me Merrick Wilson is no longer suing the city because you lifted the condemnation off the settlement agreement? Is that what you're saying?
There are innumerable legal cases with Merrick Wilson, and I am not allowed to discuss ongoing litigation. But what I can tell you is that the city is no longer condemning his property.
Okay, so you're saying that is saving us millions of dollars because
Correct.
He's no longer suing us. There's no lawsuit from Merrick Wilson.
Billy, I could not be more clear here. It is not saving us millions of dollars because of a lawsuit. The act of condemnation is where the city would take private property and pay market value for that private property. We are no longer doing that. Because we do not have to purchase Merrick Wilson's property, we are saving millions of dollars.
So could we save millions of dollars by still going back, putting the overlay on the Clausen Farm, the 2018 agreement, even though you're saying we don't have to buy Merrick Wilson's property, but are we really saving more money by doing that than if we have to relocate our police site? How much, I mean, millions, I'm looking at the figures of Flemington. They got $1 million for the land or the police station, but it was going to cost them over $5 million to relocate. So what they got was the cost of $4.4 million instead of $5.5 million.
So Flemington and Lambertville are not the same borough or city. And I think we have gone far afield from the discussion on the phase one. But to your answer, no, yes, there was significant public pushback, including from the Historic Preservation Commission regarding the historic nature of the Clausen site, which is why we moved away from it in the first place.
And why aren't they protesting now that the farm
because it's no longer a part of the plan?
But it's okay for it to be on the market as long as it's not on the plan. I just don't get it, because if there was great opposition about selling that farm to preserve it, but yet there's no great opposition now to sell it and for a developer to do whatever they need to do or want to do, I don't understand
Lily,
why
you are I'm gonna end this now. Lily, the farm is private property. You are muddying the waters of this conversation. To say that there is no public backlash when we had on November 26th of 2018, we had hundreds of people showing up to this. Include the Historic Preservation Commission wrote a letter to the council, which is on public record, that they did not support us moving forward with an overlay on the Clausen farm. We have been over this on multiple occasions. At the end of the day, you may not like to hear what the city is giving as an answer, but that is the answer. We are not going back to discuss the overlay again. We have an agreement with Fair Share Housing and the courts, and we are moving forward on that, on the action from that court hearing, and we are doing it in a way in which we can be as financially responsible as possible, which I believe we're doing.
Okay, thank
Gina,
you.
Can you bring the next?
Yes, Gina, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Good evening, everybody. This is Gina Fischetti, 116 Clinton Street. I had a couple of questions, and the first one, I apologize if this is something that was in the presentation and I missed it. I had to step away for a little bit, but I was wondering how many stories the proposed building at the police site is going to be, or how many stories are proposed, and how many square feet the proposed building will be. And then I also have some questions about the whole phase one conversation, so I don't know if I should ask those now or.
Sarah, can you answer her first questions first?
Of course. So Gina, it's going to be 1 story of parking and then 3 stories of units on top. So a total of 4 stories. And as for the square footage, Emily might be able to provide you a more exact number, but it's only going to be on the area of the police station site that is currently developed. So that existing footprint of the building with the parking, and actually because on the western end of the site, some of that space is going to be repurposed from parking lot to a green space. There will be more permeable surface on the lot at that point. And Emily, I don't know if you have the square footage off the top of your head.
Yeah, Gina, so on the concept plan, again, it's a concept plan and not a full, engineered site plan or anything. So on the concept plan that's included in the redevelopment plan, it's a 8,400 square footprint of a building. It's a 60 foot by 140 foot building. Typically, I mean, zoning ordinances don't specify dimensions of a building that's permitted. It doesn't go into that much depth. So it will include the concept plan and say that it has to be, substantially consistent with that plan, but the developer, whether it's 55 by 145 or what, the developer is allowed to ultimately figure that out.
Okay, but it won't be more than 4 stories?
Correct. It's going to be maximum 4 stories.
Okay, thanks. Sorry if I was causing you guys to waste time reiterating something you already went over. My other question has to do with the phase one. So there was conversation about the phase one and what some of the reasons not to do it are. One of those reasons would be that it could require a phase 2 study. So I'm wondering what the cost of a phase 2 study would be. And then if you could briefly say what that entails and what the implications of the phase 2 might be. And then also, I was wondering, so the comment was made that if the city does a phase 1 study, then if there's contamination found on the site by the city, then ultimately the city could be held liable or responsible for cleaning up the site. What I'm wondering is if a developer does those same studies, finds contamination that has to be remediated on site, but then for whatever reason doesn't make economic sense, developer backs out, whatever it might be, would the city then also be responsible for doing the cleanup on the site? So the question basically is, if the contamination is found by the developer, is the city held responsible, or is that only the case if the city finds the contamination?
So I'll answer your first question first. We have already discussed tonight that the cost of the phase 2 would be dependent on the total number of areas of concern.
Oh, okay, got it.
And so we can't know until we do a phase 1 what the cost of a phase 2 would be. The implication of a phase 2 would be some sort of action either by a developer or by the city. I'll let Bill answer the question of the legal. My understanding, and I am not a lawyer, is that if the city knows about an area in which some remediation is required and no one else is a current owner of that property and it's still city property, it would be on the onus would be on us to remediate it once we know about it. Bill, do you have any?
I mean, without knowing, I guess we're going to speculate in an instance where something is found and a contract purchaser decides to back out. It's not an immediate obligation. We can move forward with other options and figure out a way to negotiate with a different developer, a way to, whether that's through, a credit on a purchase price or, holding an escrow at the, after closing for some things to be cleaned up. There's a number of ways where that can get cleared up. Just because somebody backs out of an agreement doesn't say, we have to stop doing whatever we're doing and start remediating. No, I mean, there's ways around it. It depends on the structure of the contract.
And Gina, I'm sure, as you know, because you work in this field in the great state of New Jersey, there's always a little something from DEP. So I simply having some sort of, historical, whatever contamination on the site does not mean that the site is immediately undevelopable.
Sure. No, I wasn't. I didn't mean to say that it was. I was just. I don't really know that much about any of these environmental issues, so it was really just an honest question. So.
No, I wasn't saying that you were saying that. I was sort of saying that towards the general conversation that we were having tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing that there are no more hands, is there any final comments that the council would like to make? Can we move on?
Mayor, we have one 30-second slide. Is it okay if we do that as just our closing slide?
Sure, but is it funny? Like I could really.
I can try and make a joke, but okay. No, it's not funny. But it'll just take 30 seconds. Let's see. Okay, so we just wanted to briefly tell people our next steps as the CAT and refer people to our website. So for phase 2 of the CAT's work, we're going to be addressing the city-owned facilities. We're going to start doing that through doing an FAQ that'll explain what facilities we're talking about here, kind of understanding our current facilities, how they're used, and what the maintenance needs are. Then we'll begin soliciting stakeholder input. We're starting to work on a timeline of when you can expect to hear from us asking for your input. And members of the public who have any questions or want to learn more, you can visit our webpage on the city's website. It's lambertvillenj.org/CAT. And you can also see all of the presentations and things that we referenced in our presentation today. And then Paul and I welcome your feedback and questions. So you can email us at catchairs@lambertvillenj.org. And that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Paul. We'll release you from your duties of having to be on video for the rest of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I just want to reiterate my my sincerest thanks. I know we had a lot of CAT members on the call today, and this was really a labor of love. And thank you again to Emily for all of her hard work there. Okay. So it's 9:18, which means we are well behind schedule at this point. I think the only thing we're going to be able to get to here is our plan for the budget moving forward, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the updates, but I'm going to ask those to remain relatively quick. We do have one piece of business. Cindy, I'm not seeing this in the, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing this in the agenda that I have, but we do have to approve a bills list. Was the bills list sent to council?
It's actually posted in the agenda. It's really just to pay the procurement card, which it's due before our next meeting. So it was postage to the newsletter, $752.73. Our monthly bill to MailChimp for $49.99, and Zoom meeting fees for $447.78. That's it. It's all for the procurement card.
Okay, so are there any questions regarding the bills list in particular, as that needs to get paid before Cindy, I assume we have the funds to cover?
Yes, we do.
Great. Okay, so that being as it is, does anybody have any questions from the council on the bills list? Okie dokie. Can I get a motion to pay our bills? That's Council President Acero for the first, Councilwoman Urbish for the second. Can I get a roll call vote?
Councilman Sanders.
Yes.
Councilwoman Taylor.
Yes.
Councilwoman Urbish.
Yes.
Council President Acero.
Yes.
Mayor Fall.
Yes.
Thank you.
Really briefly here, we are working on going through our requests with our department heads. That process has been slowed just due to the lack of business administrator. We are taking some time to reassess and reevaluate some of the budget some of the budget process that we did last year. I heard from multiple members of council that there were some concerns about, department heads doing presentations in October and then being expected to sort of maintain that information until May when we voted on the budget. So in some ways, this reduction in speed will work in our favor, as a lot of those presentations will be kicked to next year. But we are still doing a deep dive with our finance team, which has already begun, and starting to talk about some of the larger budgetary plans and large ticket items that we need on both the capital and operations side. That being said, as a part of that planning process, I'll be reaching out to each of the members of council, and I'd ask you, I was hoping we would have more of a fruitful discussion about that tonight, but being that it's already 9:30, I'm going to ask that each of you go back through your notes over the course of last year to give us some indications of what you felt went well and what didn't go well as a part of our budget process. Once we passed the budget, what you felt like you wish you had known in October, so that we can start to make significant edits to the structure of that process. So I'm going to give everybody a little bit of homework instead of talking about it now. And we can put, that budget proposal, some of those budget changes onto the discussion items for our next working session. I think we've pocketed everything else for the evening. So I will kick it over to Councilwoman Urbish if you want to give a quick business update.
Not anything majorly different from last time. Folks are putting out their Halloween decorations. The chamber's doing their scarecrow contest. Beautification committee's been out, and we are seeing more and more storefronts get filled, which is really exciting. So just continuing the ongoing coordination with the chamber and businesses.
Great. Thank you so much. And Councilman Sanders, if you'd like to talk briefly about the census. Oh, you are muted. There you go.
With that. Okay, I appear to have my notes. Okay, so 20 seconds here. So the state's enumeration rate, which is that's the reference by the census to include both what the census workers count as well as self-responses, is at 99.9% according to the U.S. Census Bureau. We don't have data specifically for Lambertville, And I guess, we were talking before about the census ending on September 30th, but as a result of a court order, the data collection operations are going to continue through October 31st. So the census employees have been instructed to continue their work. There may be a couple of folks in Lambertville who have not yet been counted. If you are among them, or if you know folks are among them, please make sure that you respond or have them respond. We do have until the end of October, according to the court order. That's what I have.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mhm.
20 seconds on Halloween. We are discouraging people from doing door-to-door trick-or-treating this year. Just, obviously Halloween in Lambertville has potential to be a super spreader event. We want to keep people safe. We're working with a series of volunteers to come up with alternatives, although it has been hard to garner volunteer interest in that effort. If you are interested in being helpful in, planning some alternate children's events for Halloween, please let us know. But at this point, we would really encourage folks to try and to take safety measures, not encourage people to come to your front door, not interact on a one-on-one basis with any of the kiddos for Halloween. And that we hope to get back to Halloween as normal next year. But as it stands now, it's just not in the public health and safety, for the good of the public health and safety for our city.
Mayor, we put out some pretty comprehensive guidance. If that's not already up on the website, I think that would be a good resource to have there.
It was sent to the public outreach team later today, so I think it's going out tomorrow.
Okay, great. I found it helpful looking at it in terms of how I can plan out what I'm going to be doing that day.
It's better than what Carrie's plan is, which was, I think, 400 individual hand sanitizers. So don't come to our house, I guess. Okay, with that, a couple of quick announcements. Because it's leaf falling season, we have expanded the total convenience hours to ensure that if you are at home doing yard work, as I will be this weekend, that you have a place to dump your leaves. So just a quick reminder, October 17th, October 21st, and October 28th, the convenience center will be open. Okay, so with that, we'll open up for any other public comments from the public. Tina?
Yes. Lauren, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
I just wanted to mention that Lambertville Goes Wild is working with the Environmental Commission to encourage you to leave your leaves for environmental reasons, and we'll be rolling out outreach to the community in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Oh, Lauren, if you don't mind staying on the phone here really quickly, I want to make sure, first of all, Carrie hears that so I don't have to do those chores this weekend. Also, we'd be happy to share that on our Facebook and, through the city streams. If you guys can get us like an infographic or something, if you don't have one of those and you'd like to be able to use some of the city resources to make them, I'd be happy to make that available to you.
They are in the works and on their way.
Okay, great. And you'll just text Carrie directly that I don't have to clean up my leaves anymore.
That's exactly right.
Perfect. Okay. Any other comments from the community? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to go into closed session. This should be relatively brief, I promise. I think we got to read a thing. Council President, can you read the resolution?
A resolution to go into closed session to discuss anticipated litigation involving the city pursuant to NJSA 40:4-12B7.
Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Councilwoman Taylor for the first, Councilman Sanders for the second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. With that, I think council, you have to close this and go to the secondary meeting.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, everybody. Hi, Sue.
Oh, you know what? Councilman Sanders.
Yeah, looks like we all ended up in the, Councilwoman Urbish was the only one who's millennial.
No, Councilman Taylor was here.
Oh, no.
I am not a
Just
millennial.
sitting here staring at each other.
It's
Okay,
not
so do
so
we-
bad, Councilwoman Taylor.
So I've been told.
I think we've got can I get a motion to close
So moved.
and adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Aye.